This is a famous game between Paul Morphy and two chess players. Paul Morphy was a famous grandmaster, and this game was played in 1858 in Paris. Morphy is playing white. He starts off with e4, and black plays e5. This game is called Morphy's Opera House game, and this was played at an opera house over watching an opera. Knight f3, attacking the pawn. d6, this is called the Philidor defense. d4. Now this attacks the pawn on e5 because the pawn on d4 attacks e5, and the knight on f3 is also attacking e5, whereas the e5 pawn only has one defender, which is the pawn on d6. And now here black plays bishop g4, and this move is a mistake because it allows white to quicken their development and get their pieces out. And it'll become more clear as you watch the game why that's the case. A better move would probably have been pawn takes pawn. But bishop g4, and now Morphy plays pawn captures pawn on e5. The point of bishop g4 was to pin the knight to the queen and stop the knight from attacking the e5 pawn. Here black plays bishop takes f3, and if we go back, if black played pawn takes pawn, then the knight can't capture the pawn right now because that would leave the queen to be captured, and that would be checkmate. But white would play queen takes queen, king takes queen, knight takes pawn on e5, and white's up a pawn, and now the bishop's attacked, and this pawn right here is attacked. And let's say if black played bishop to d7, then knight takes f7, check, and the rook is going to be captured next move, so the bishop would come back here, and white's doing much better here. Black would have not much hope of winning, especially against the grandmaster down a pawn. So after bishop takes knight, white plays queen takes f3. It develops the queen to a square where it can't be attacked. It's not bad to develop your queen to a square as long as it can't be attacked in the beginning of the game. Now pawn takes pawn on e5, and now white plays bishop to c4. And this move is really good because it's developing a piece, getting ready to castle, and it's threatening checkmate. If black played something like, well, black plays knight f6 in the game to stop checkmate, but if black played something like knight c6, queen takes f7 is checkmate. So after knight f6, if we look at the development here, white has two pieces out and black only has one piece out, and it's white's turn. So white is ahead in development. Now Morphy plays queen to b3, and this move attacks the pawn on b7 and the pawn on f7. It attacks the pawn on f7 because both the bishop and the queen are attacking the pawn, and the pawn is only defended by the king. If the bishop captured on f7, the king could not capture back because the king would be captured by the queen. And now black plays queen to e7. And now this move is okay, it defends the pawn on f7. So now if bishop takes the pawn on f7, the queen would capture back, and if the queen captured, queen from b3 takes the queen on f7, and the king would capture back. So I'll just show you that. Well, the move in the game was knight c3, but I'll show you this. Bishop takes f7 check, queen takes f7, queen takes f7, king takes f7, and white has lost a bishop, so that's not a good move. Okay, another option here is queen takes b7, and this move is okay. It looks really great because the rook here cannot move, and black would be losing a rook if black didn't have this move, queen to b4 check. And now the queen is defended by the bishop, and the queen here on b7 is forced to capture back, or else the queen here on b7 is going to be lost. So then after something like this, black is down a pawn, but it's not that bad. That was the idea, was to be able to bring the queen here and get a queen trade, because white has gained some pretty strong initiative, and it's surprising because it was only a move, I think move like 3 or 4, when the bishop came out to g4, like something so early could be a mistake. But here, white is already gaining an attack just a few moves into the game. And so here, now white plays knight c3, and the point of this move is to be able to threaten to capture on b7, and now if the queen were to come to b4, it wouldn't be check, so the queen would just capture the rook. So, for example, if let's say, what happened in the game was pawn to c6, but let's just go back and say, what if black ignored that hanging pawn and played g6, then queen to b7. If the queen came here again, the queen just captures the rook, so that doesn't work. So black plays pawn to c6, and this move defends the pawn with the queen. So now it's no longer being attacked. And it also prevents the knight from coming here on d5. This knight from coming here. And also from the knight coming to b5. So controlling a little bit of the center too, the move c6 does. And now white plays, oh, no, I'm sorry. That's not right. White plays bishop to g5. Okay, and this is the end of part 1. We can go to part 2 for the rest of the game. This is part 2 of Morphy's Opera House game. White just played bishop to g5, and this move pins the knight to the queen. And now Bobby Fischer analyzed this game, and he said that in this position, black has no good moves. Black plays pawn to b5. And this attacks the bishop, and the idea is to get the bishop out of there so the black can get some space and get their pieces out. But let's just take a look. Like if the knight tries to come here to knight d7, then the queen captures on b7, and it looks like a really tough position to play. So after b5, white looks, and here look, black has 2 pieces developed, the knight and the queen, and white has 4 pieces developed. And when you're playing a game of chess and you clearly have some strategical advantages, like you have more pieces developed, there's a good rule of thumb, which is that if your opponent plays an aggressive move, you can play a more aggressive one. And Morphy realizes that Morphy is ahead in development, and so Morphy sacrifices the knight. The knight takes b5. So after Pawn takes b5, bishop takes b5 check. White has sacrificed a knight for 2 pawns. 2 pawns is worth 2 points, a knight is worth 3 points. White's going down on material 1 point to get an attack against the king. And now Morphy calculated probably at least 6 or 7 moves into the position after knight takes b5. And the only move here worth analyzing is knight to d7. And then Morphy had seen this out, and Morphy decided to play castles queenside. And now here, there's only one real way to defend the knight, which is rook to d8. And this move is defending the knight, but look how cramped the king is. This is one reason you don't want to block your bishop in, is because the king doesn't get castled, the rooks aren't coordinated, and it can provide real problems for yourself if you don't castle, because your king can get attacked more easily. This sacrifice wouldn't have worked, knight takes b5, if the king was castled on the king side. If the black king was castled, the sacrifice would not have worked. But here, Morphy plays this move. Rook takes d7. And the reason he does that is because he sees that this rook over here isn't doing anything. This bishop here isn't doing anything. Morphy's trying to play with all of his pieces. So here the knight can't capture back because then the queen would be lost with bishop takes queen. And the queen can't capture back because then the queen would be lost with bishop takes queen. Both pieces are worth less than the queen. And both the bishop and the rook are worth less than the queen and not worth trading. So black plays rook takes d7. And now Morphy planned this out. Morphy played rook to d1. And this looks like a really good position for white, because the rook is pinned to the king, the knight is pinned to the queen, the king is in the center, every single one of white's pieces is joining in on the attack. And this does not look good for black. So after rook to d1, black wants to get rid of this pin, the knight to the queen, so black plays queen to e6. And now after, now that the knight is free to capture back if the rook gets captured. So now here Morphy calculates checkmate in 5 moves. And you should pause the video and try to at least see the first move or the first 2 moves. Even if you get the first move, that's great. But if you see the whole thing, that's fantastic. But either way, this game is to be appreciated as a great attacking game of chess. And Morphy was a great attacking player. So don't worry about it if you don't see the rest of the game out. But bishop takes d7 check is played. And now there's only one move worth considering, which is knight takes d7. And now here there's checkmate in 3 moves if you want to pause again and try to see it. If not, just keep going. Queen to b8 check. And now if this move gives up the queen, but after knight takes b8, rook takes d8 is checkmate. And here, Morphy might have seen this whole game through. It's not crazy to think that he didn't see that checkmate from knight takes b5. It's possible he calculated it, because these moves were pretty forced. But it's likely he definitely saw. When he played rook d1, I'm thinking he calculated queen e6 leads to checkmate. But even if he didn't, it's still great calculation to see it from here. So now if we just go back just to look at the main point of the game, develop your pieces as quickly as possible, and that's how you build an attack. Bishop g4 was the mistake. Pawn takes, bishop takes, queen takes. And black just made a tiny, tiny mistake in the beginning, and the rest of the game was lost. But that's how chess is. A tiny disadvantage can eventually turn into a loss and a victory for your opponent. Or a tiny advantage turns into a victory for yourself. And notice how every single one of white's pieces joins in on the attack in this game. And here the bishop and the rook never do anything. It was like they weren't even there.